Hello, I'm Dennis Sewell and this is Politics UK. Last October, Andrew Neither, one of Tony Blair's former speechwriters, now turned newspaper columnist, wrote an article for the Evening Standard cheerfully celebrating how London had become one of the most interesting and cosmopolitan capitals in the world, largely thanks to immigration. Little did he know it then, but Neither had shaken the bottle of one of the most volatile issues in British politics. For buried in his article were a number of revelations drawn from Neither's time right at the centre of power. Immigration, he said, hadn't just happened. It had been the deliberate policy of ministers from late 2000 to open up the UK to mass migration. Neither said he'd seen early drafts of a government document which included a driving political purpose, that mass immigration was the way the government was going to make the UK truly multicultural. And one intention of the policymakers, Neither had concluded, was to rub the right's nose in diversity and render their arguments out of date. Until this moment, not even the Labour government's most caustic critics had thought that mass immigration was deliberate. The government was incompetent, they'd said. It had lost control of the borders. But now they were crying conspiracy. The blogosphere dubbed the revelation Neithergate, and the pressure group Migration Watch UK put in a Freedom of Information request for the draft policy document Neither had cited. And this week they got it. So, mass immigration. Was it cock-up, conspiracy, or not really a problem at all? I consulted Sir Andrew Green of Migration Watch and Labour's Denis McShane, a former Europe minister. And I began by asking Sir Andrew Green whether now he had his document, he thought he had a smoking gun.
There's certainly quite a lot of smoke around. Remember that Andrew Neither also said, and I quote here, the deliberate policy of ministers from late 2000 was to open up the UK to mass immigration. And he said there'd been a lot of nervousness about it because ministers were concerned about how the white working class might react. And he said that the policy document had been very heavily revised to take out the social element. And that's really the new point. In this document we now have, we've got an earlier draft, and it does show that that is exactly what did happen. 6 out of 8 references to social policy were removed, and that suggests, I think, that his first account of the matter was indeed the truth.
Denis McShane, if the government wasn't doing what Sir Andrew accuses them of doing, what were these mysterious social objectives that figure in the first draft of the report?
I'm baffled. I actually hired Andrew Neither from the United States to be my researcher before the 1997 election. He's now a very distinguished comment page editor of the Evening Standard paper, and talking to him, he deeply regrets the hullabaloo he started with a very quick comment. And there are so many documents and papers swirling around government. It's quite true, since 1997 or a bit before, Britain's had an awful lot of foreigners coming in, 400,000 French, 200,000 Americans. We've had the asylum seekers, and I wish we could get them to go home more quickly. And we also have dispersed asylum seekers into every small council in the country, so their presence is felt. Well, we now have a recession, the polls are going home, the jobs aren't on offer. The idea there was a deliberate policy or a structured policy is just silly.
We just have a look at the numbers. Let's leave European Union immigration out of it for the time being. In the years immediately following this document, which was drafted in the summer of 2000, I think, Sir Andrew Green, what was the pattern, what was the scale of non-EU immigration into Britain?
Well, if you look at 1997, it was 90,000, and the last available year, 190,000. So under the present government, it has doubled.
So those figures are per annum. So they're coming in almost 200,000 a year, Denis McShane. Now, sometimes this government's been accused of losing control of the borders, that being in chaos and being incompetent about immigration. And now there's this allegation that actually it's all deliberate. Which would you prefer it to be?
It's just silly. Clearly, the biggest problem is the fact that we have about 700,000 to 800,000 asylum seekers who are dispersed all over the country and whose cases haven't been heard. We've had a booming economy, so a lot more Americans, Malaysian, people from Hong Kong, people from Latin America have come in. In terms of permanent immigrants with the right to stay in the UK, most of those have come in because they've contributed to the economic boom we've had. Our difficulty, I would argue, is, and I've never resiled from this, is the problem particularly of hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers we haven't been able to deal with, and to a different extent after 2004 the fact that white Catholic Poles en masse came and Slovakians came, and then there was a real contest for many poorly paid jobs. But unless we want the 2 million Brits who I suppose are immigrants in Europe to be shipped home, there is not a lot that we can do about it, or perhaps should do about it.
Sir Andrew, during those years, the early years, 2000 to say 2005, wasn't it a reasonably sensible thing to do to bring in skilled people to help the economy develop, particularly if people could not be found with those skills in the UK?
Well, I think you have to draw a balance between people whose skills are valuable and the size of our population. That is really where it's now beginning to bite.
Dennis McShane, coming back to the original point that Andrew Neither made in his article, he said that there were people within the Labour Party, and they needn't be ministers. These people could be special advisors, or they could be kind of all sorts of junior people. But they, according to his account, were enthusiastic to build a multicultural Britain, to kind of set the seal on it by bringing in such numbers that it would be irreversible, or at least it would be clear for all to see. Do you never detect that kind of feeling amongst your comrades in the Labour Party?
I'm afraid I simply didn't. I've seen some very ugly references from Immigration Watch. This is all about collaring the vote. I'm glad that David Cameron is promoting Muslim and Afro-Caribbean MPs and peeresses and people in the Lords. And I think it's quite outrageous to make these allegations. On the contrary, if you want to use that term white working class, which I don't really like, I represent a white working class constituency with about 8,000, not a minority, of principally Kashmiri Muslims. They, if anything, are the people who have been most hurt or sent disconfabulated by the arrival of asylum seekers. But I just am not quite sure when you just have this constant drive that we're suffering from mass immigration. Sir Andrew's very moderate as an ex-diplomat in his language. There are an awful lot of people in, if I may put it, his broad cap, I'm not making any accusation against him, who use very immoderate language.
I think there are two questions that one has to ask here. One is, how could immigration on this scale, 3 million in total over 12 years, have been allowed to happen in the face of public opposition, unless there was, at the very least, the outcome that the government privately wanted to see? If new migrants had supported Conservatives by 5 to 1 or 30 to 1, as they seem to, would a Labour government have turned a blind eye to a flow of potential Conservative voters on that scale? I wonder.
Aha. So, Dennis McShane, it seems to be the position that what Labour's being accused of is perhaps replacing its declining core constituency of white working class with migrants who are going to vote Labour.
The notion there's a migrant or immigrant voting pool is the fantasy of the right-wing press.
Sir Andrew Green and Dennis McShane MP.